can you give us your name and birth date?
Hugh Stapleton, March 10th, 1947.
Okay. And so, where were you living at the time the war started?
In West Philly on Regent Street.
Okay. And so did that area, was that like a very affected area by the war, would you say?
Oh, yeah.
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 In what way?
Well, I got drafted 5 months after I got out of West Catholic to go with the, well, they drafted me for the Army, but I ended up joining the
What
Marine
was
Corps.
West Catholic? Sorry.
Oh, high school.
Okay.
High school in the neighborhood.
Okay.
So, yeah, we ended up losing, I think out of my class, we lost 9 guys. And overall, probably 25, 30 altogether between, different classes of West Catholic.
From the draft?
No, from being killed in Vietnam.
Oh, okay. All right. And so, I guess the age, you were 18 when you joined the war?
Yes.
Okay. And so what branch of service and rank were you?
I was in Marine Corps, I was a Lance Corporal.
Okay. And so you already said that you were drafted. Did you know anyone who enlisted? Were there a lot of people?
Oh, well, there was 4 of us enlisted in the Marine Corps together because we were all going to get drafted. If you didn't have a deferment, you were going.
Got it. So, what were the views of your parents and or peers on joining that weren't obviously going to war?
Well, they pretty much thought we were doing the same thing our parents did. Your country needed you, so you went to war. I mean, it was, that's what we were raised on. John Wayne movies and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. And so you said you already knew people from your high school going to war, and did you know of anyone trying to avoid being drafted?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
I heard about them, but I didn't know any personally.
Okay. So in the pre-war or early war stages, what were your views before on like the Cold War and then communism?
Well, I thought we were doing the right thing, going and fighting communism, because that's what we were told. That was what the media presented, and, we didn't know any different.
Do you think that if the media hadn't presented it in that way, you would have had different views?
No, because I grew up with those views anyway,
So by growing up, you mean like from your parents? And
yes, from everybody. I mean, our whole generation, they had all fought in World War II. So it was just accepted that if your country needs you, you go.
Okay. So then, were you sent overseas right away?
No, I didn't go over for about a year and a half.
What were you doing then during that time you weren't overseas?
We were training. I was on a ship, heavy cruiser. So we were constantly doing training, and then we eventually went over there summer of '67.
Okay, and so then where were you sent when you eventually did go?
Well, I was up and down the whole coastline. We were on a ship, so we pretty much went where they sent us. During the day, we mostly fired gunfire support missions for Marines ashore, from Da Nang up to, say, the northern third of the country. And then at night, we mostly went up to North Vietnam and shot whatever they wanted shot. Communication towers, missile sites, staging areas, supply areas, whatever.
Okay. So was that, would you say that was like combat, or like what were you doing?
It was combat,
Combat, yeah.
Okay. We were shooting at them, they were shooting at us. They weren't real happy about it.
Yeah. So then, and you said this was 1967?
67 and 68.
67, okay. And, so, I should have asked this before. When were you, discharged from the war again? When did you leave?
I got out in January of '69.
Okay.
About 5 months after I got out, or after I got back from Vietnam.
Okay, so you were overseas for 2 years then?
Year and a half.
Year and a half, okay. And so what would you say, the hardest thing to deal with early on than compared to later?
Well, the immediate problem was dealing with friends that you lost that were killed or, seriously injured. Later, you found out about the toll that it took on all kinds of other guys after they got back.
Okay.
That had problems that they never thought they would have had, mostly PTSD and things like that,
Okay. So yeah, did you, was there a lot of like camaraderie?
Oh yeah, it was all camaraderie,
Yeah.
That was the best part about it.
So could you tell me maybe about, just like, if you don't want to say anything, but just about like combat and how like, just like how it was like during the war, if it like really like I'm sure it did like take a toll and everything, but could you just expand on that a little bit?
Well, combat was there was no rhyme or reason to it. You just responded to what you were told that day. You had no idea what the overall picture was. You just knew you get up in the morning and they had targets for you to shoot, and you started shooting at them. When you ran out of ammo, you had work parties. You went back offshore to an oiler, to an ammunition ship, to a foodstuff ship. To pick up supplies. Then you come right back and continue shooting.
Okay, and so then when you said you went in '67, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then, but even like before that, when the Vietnamese fired on an American ship in like the Gulf of Tonkin incident, did that, and then it was kind of like met with like military retaliation by the U.S. Did this affect you? Like, did that affect you?
I was part of that
You
retaliation.
were part of that retaliation? Okay. And so, was there a difference? I mean, I'm sure you weren't there before, so you wouldn't know, but I mean, was there a difference in, like, how do I say this, like, why you were being sent over? Because it was a retaliation instead of just you were already there?
Well, we had no idea why we were there. They supposedly it was truth, justice, and the American way, and we're saving them, going to turn them into a nice democracy like we do for so many countries. However, in our little corner of the world, that had nothing to do with what we were doing. Somebody had this great idea that we'll do all this, we'll do all that, but day to day, none of that happened. You didn't see any progress. We did the same things day after day after day. Just float out there, wait for a phone call to shoot at something. You'd fire 2 rounds, sometimes you fire 20 rounds, sometimes you fire 100. And then you just move on to the next one. It was just, you're doing it by rote pretty much,
Yeah.
I mean, you're so damn tired, you're doing 18, 20-hour days. So half the time you're almost asleep on your feet. You're stumbling around and just doing it because you know how.
So would you say that was like frustrating for you? Or did you not mind because you were like doing that for your country? Was that frustrating not knowing why, like you said?
Well, not particularly. You were so damn tired you have time to question it. All you want to do is let me sleep for a couple hours here.
Yeah. And do you think that was felt by like most people, everyone?
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
most of the guys you couldn't sleep while they were shooting because the guns were so damn big. I'll show you the book here. You'll get a better perspective here.
Okay. So let's see. Then, so I already asked kind of about your attitude. Were there any changes as time went on, like even before you actually were sent overseas? Were there any changes about your attitude toward the war as opposed to like beginning and the end?
My attitude changed completely when I got back from the war.
Okay. Could you tell me a little about that?
Well, I ended up joining peace groups. I joined John Kerry and Vietnam Vets Against the War. I went around and I spoke to some high schools trying to talk to people how to don't enlist. It's incredibly stupid and you have no idea what you're doing.
Really?
We certainly didn't,
Yeah.
But you didn't know any of that until you got back and, you finally got some other sources of information than Armed Forces Radio,
Got it. And so, so you went around and spoke to high schools about being not joining the war. How did the students like respond to that? Were a lot of people
Pretty well.
aware? Yeah.
Yeah.
By that time.
Simply because, I was there, they really couldn't challenge it, I mean.
Yeah.
I was there. These, I don't know what they're telling you, but they weren't there. They're full of shit, most of them, The recruiters are going to tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can drive a jet, don't worry about a thing. Well, they see your scores, they know damn well you're not even qualified to load gas into the jet, let alone fly the damn thing.
Yeah. So,
Mary Kate, can you grab me a beer?
so going into the war, you felt like you were like doing it for your country and you were like happy with that, you would say, and then...
Oh, we were enthusiastically doing it. We really thought we were saving the country and bringing peace and justice to the free world. And thank you. As it turned out, it was none of the above,
Yeah. And so then by the end, you came out and you were the one going around to high schools telling people why they shouldn't join the war.
Right.
Okay. So, what do you think so it was mostly just the not knowing why and just doing what you were told that essentially changed your attitude?
Well, it was just a repetition, and it's guys dying over the same damn thing, and you saw absolutely no progress whatsoever. Just more guys that you grew up with are now dead.
Yeah.
So that tends to wear on you after a while.
Yeah. So, would you say how did you feel about the leadership then of like President like Johnson or even just like your
Leadership was non-existent. They all talked a good game. once you got above like your immediate lieutenant or captain, you had no real dealings with leadership. You know, the big bosses didn't talk to us. We're peasants. You know, we meant nothing to them. So, you know.
Yeah. So how did you feel about the president, like Johnson? I guess was the handling of the war situation.
Well, he screwed it up mightily, you know, but we were all for more troops because if there was more troops, maybe we'll get this solved and we'll all get home a whole lot sooner. So we enthusiastically supported adding more troops if Johnson was going to send them. But then they just started running in circles. They didn't have any idea what they were doing. You know, they were starting to micromanage everything from Washington. And they have generals that spent their 30 years studying how to run a war, and some politicians calling the shots. Kind of pointless, you know.
Yeah.
A politician who's never been in the military, but he knows all about winning wars, you know.
Yeah. So then, at home, did you hear? At home, what news did you hear of like the protests and everything that were going on while you were overseas, and how did?
Very little. Well, the information got to us was censored. You know, it was you got the Stars and Stripes newspaper, which the military published, and the only radio we got was Armed Forces radio. You know, you got Hanoi Hannah once in a while on the radio, you know, with a propaganda thing, but there was no real radio outlets we could tune into.
Yeah. So then, would you say it was kind of did it shock you when you went home when you saw the attitudes of the Americans?
Yes, it was quite a difference. You know.
Yeah. So then, how long?
But in between, the Tet Offensive took place.
Okay.
Which is what pretty much stood the country on its ear. That was January of '68.
Yeah.
So I was halfway through my tour then.
Yeah, could you tell me about the Tet Offensive and how?
Well, they hit, I don't know how many places, that they hit all across the whole country, hundreds of different sites were attacked that first night, and probably thousands when they all added up and stuff. But they just did a big, they lured us up to Khe Sanh, this fire base up there. It was right up on the North Vietnamese border, so they, were attacking that for about 6 weeks prior to this Tet Offensive.
Okay.
And everybody had shifted manpower, equipment, all kinds of stuff up north to where this problem was taking place. And once all that equipment got shifted up there, when they hit the cities, it wasn't available to defend the cities.
Okay, so then you were attacking that. What was it? What was the city called? Sorry, what did you say?
Hue is the name of the city.
Right. So you were attacking that. You said 6 weeks prior to.
Yeah, it wasn't a city. It was a fire support base is what it was.
Oh,
It was
okay.
just an outpost kind of thing.
Got it. So then, so the Tet Offensive. Then after that, what were the kind of repercussions of that?
Well, the biggest repercussion was probably Walter Cronkite, who came to Vietnam. He was like the number one newsman at the time, without a doubt. He was like everybody's Uncle Walter. Everybody trusted him in the country. He was.
Yeah.
Well, he came and he was there for after Tet, and he saw the widespread, the attacks and the organization and all that, and he came back and he said, at the end of one of his broadcasts one night, he says, we're going to lose this thing. This is a joke. They don't seem to know what they're doing. They have no idea what the response should be, and that pretty much, that pushed the country probably over the edge.
Yeah.
As far as look, when you lost Walter Cronkite, you've lost the whole country. He was. Because he was an enthusiastic supporter of the war. He believed them. Yeah, you guys are right. You can go in there and do it. That's good. Save them poor people and stuff. Well, he went over there and looked for himself and said, well, they're getting nothing done over there. And we weren't. We're running in the same circles day after day.
Got it. Yeah, so building on that, do you think that TV, because that it was the first televised war, do you think that had a
Oh, without a doubt. Had an impact on me. I couldn't stop watching the news every night when I got home. I wanted to see what's happening to my outfits, to other outfits, to people I knew, So I was riveted to that every evening.
So you think that TV ultimately made people more cynical about the war than they had been about other wars, just for that reason?
Oh, without a doubt, yeah. They could see the nonsense was coming in their living room night after night after night. They keep seeing the neighborhood kid, man, getting carried home here without a leg, Well, he must have had a great experience,
And so then, let's see. And so then how, oh, sorry. And then do you remember the day that you learned you were going home?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And what was that day like for you?
Everybody had their day,
Yeah.
You knew when you got there the day you were leaving. And everybody had what they called a short-timers calendar, which was, some cases it was a map of the country. they'd fill in like all the squares, you know, until you got down to 365 or whatever your date was and stuff. So anybody you talk to could say exactly how many days they had left,
Yeah.
you know.
Okay. And so, what do you remember about the day? And not just your feelings. Do you remember what everyone else was feeling, or was it basically the same kind of?
It was all pretty much the same thing. Let's get the hell out of here, you know.
So it was relief. It wasn't like there wasn't any kind of, or was there any kind of like sadness, or was it like bittersweet?
It wasn't bittersweet at all. We just wanted out.
You just wanted out.
Yeah,
Okay.
get me the hell out of here.
And so then, I guess I already asked you, but when you came home, you noticed that, I guess, you got to see the reality of like how Americans were seeing the war after you got out. And so, how long after that did you start talking to high schools?
Maybe 6 months to a year after I got out.
Yeah.
One of the neighbors, you remember the Pratts?
Yeah.
Denny Pratt? She's the one who got me into it. You know, she was hooked up with, what was her name? Bess Meyerson, who was a former Miss America, who had started a peace group, you know. So Denny Pratt was working with her, you know, and they were doing a presentation one day, and she asked me if I'd be interested in coming along. So, yeah, I wouldn't do anything else. I said, yeah, I'll go, you know.
Yeah, so what was that like that day? And where did you end up going to?
I forget the high school. It was a public school. But, you know, I just talked to the kids, you know. They had a little presentation, showed a film and all that kind of stuff. And then they asked, I was kind of like the on-site expert, you know, that was, nobody else had been there, you know. I was one of the first they had met that had come back, you know.
So the schools were like allowed to do this? Did the schools like, because I'm sure that they had like people coming who wanted the people to enlist too.
Oh, yeah, they had recruiters who come to school, sure.
So yeah, they just wanted to. Why did they let both sides in? Did they just want to like balance it out and give the kids like an educated decision?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, you're having these guys give their side of the story. Why don't we get some people in that'll tell the flip side of that story, which is pretty much what I did. You know?
Yeah.
We'll talk to you later, Kate.
Okay. So what did you remember? What maybe the government or even just like the city had to say about like sending people like you in to talk to high schools? Did they?
Well, it wasn't like a widespread thing. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there was other people doing it, but I mean, it was, you know, kind of an individual thing. You know, Danny would just call me and say, I'm talking to a school on Tuesday. You're available. Can you come by? You know, and more often than not, I did.
Okay, and you said the kids are mostly receptive to it then?
Yeah. So, well, I was, you know, they had nobody else to talk to that had been there. You know, I mean, it was relatively new in the neighborhood.
So, and could you give me the name of what the organization was called again?
Mothers Against War, or Mother something.
Okay.
Bess Meyerson was the woman who ran it. And she was, I don't know, Miss America in maybe late 40s, early 50s, something like that.
So, let's see here. And so has serving in the war influenced how you feel about events today and even like the war today?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
In what way? So how do you view it?
Well, the way I view it is you only go to war if your country's threatened or, you know, it's at risk in some form.
Mm-hmm.
You don't go in there and, you know, steal somebody's oil just because they have it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, which is pretty much what we did in the Middle East, you know. There's only 3 things in Iraq. You've got sand, you've got camel shit, and you got oil. Now, what do you think we're there for?
I'm guessing the oil.
And you know, see Dick Cheney for you know, for information on this. Yes, we're saving them. Yes.
So, but I guess that kind of goes back to, I guess in Vietnam. So you don't agree that we should have gone to Vietnam at all?
No, we shouldn't have. We should have never been anywhere near there. That was another money grab. You know, they wanted the oil drilling rights to the South China Sea and the mineral rights to Southeast Asia. Mm-hmm. When it was all said and done, they got none of the above.
Mm-hmm. What about the people? How did you feel about protecting the people, though?
Well, we thought that's what we were there for in the first place. And we had no problem with the people, except until they started to kill you, you know. And then it kind of went south, you know. But as far as the individual person, they could care less about what was going on. All they wanted to do was finish their chores for the day, which was mostly plowing a field, planting rice, picking rice, irrigating fields, something like that, and have a bowl of rice for everybody that was sitting around the dinner table that night. That was their only thing. You know, we'd start getting, you know, shot at in the middle of their rice Patty, they would just lay down beside the water buffalo until it was over. When they stopped shooting, they would get back up and go right back to plowing. You know, they didn't know if we were there for democracy, whether Republicans were communists, were this, that. They could care less. We're farmers. We don't even have electricity, let alone access to all this other nonsense you guys are talking about. They had a very simple life till we showed up, you know, and then we started burning it and blowing it up, and you know.
Yeah. So how were the South Vietnamese anyway when you were there? How did they receive you guys?
Well, they received us because, you know, we were keeping them alive and keeping the other knuckleheads off them.
So,
Plus, they were making, you know, a ton of money.
wait, they were making a ton of money?
Well, they had bars and restaurants and
Oh, okay. So
any other kind of thing, you know.
yeah,
We have a bunch of fish over there with $20 bills in their pocket. Somebody get them a case of beer.
yeah.
If the beers are $5 a can, did we care? No. Get them over here.
So that's fun. So with the South Vietnamese anyway, there was. Would you say you had a good relationship between them? I mean,
No, we didn't trust them any further than we could throw.
Yeah.
You know, especially their army. Their army wasn't worth a shit, you know.
Did you have to? Was there? Did you have to work with their army anyway? Did you ever see them?
No, well, we saw them, but we rarely worked with them, you know.
Okay. So then, let's see. If there was one basic thing that you think young people should know about the Vietnam War, what would it be? You could just,
We should look before we leap.
yeah.
We didn't, you know. We just took our country's word. Oh, yeah, okay, you're right. And by the time we got over there and committed ourselves, and well, it was too late. You can't get out now, you know. You got 500,000 kids over here.
So what would you say to like a young person just getting out of high school who decides they want to enlist or they want to go overseas and fight for their country just because?
Well, nobody, you know, wants to go overseas and fight for their country. You know, I mean, a lot of the times people are joining the military is because it's an opportunity to learn a skill and, you know, get yourself a decent paying job when you get out of there. Military is the best technical schools out there. You know, things like GPS. Military is using GPS 10 years before commercial airline pilots even got it. You know, we had it in Vietnam. So they have the very cutting edge technology, you know. So if you're into anything computers related to technical skills, that's a place to go. And there's a tremendous lot of good that, you know, that the military can do. You know, they do more than just fight wars. They, you know, prevent a lot of wars because people know, hey, they got a good military. We're not going to bother them.
So yeah, you don't have a problem with like the military. It's just the fighting the war is where you think you should.
I'm sure there are necessary wars to fight, but Vietnam was one, and neither was Afghanistan or Iraq or any of the other nonsense they've done since. You know, it's just it's a way to make money.
So we should go to war when we're directly threatened, not
Right.
out of greed.
Right.
Okay.
That makes sense. I mean, yeah. You know, money shouldn't be the motivator.
And the Vietnam War was a war of greed, you think?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Eisenhower warned about the military-industrial complex. So many of these generals and admirals that were in the military when they retire to the defense industries, which is like, you know, General Dynamics, who builds submarines, you know, Boeing, who builds, you know, airplanes for its jets. So they all end up working for these guys. So they have a good reason to make sure that we buy plenty of equipment. And if I'm working for them and we're buying plenty of equipment, well, the company's obviously making a ton of money. And I have stock options, so I'm going to get a ton of money. So if they're sending somebody else's kids over there and they're just making money, they don't really care. As long as it's not their kids. And that whole Iraq war, there was only 3 of our leaders in this country, say the top 600 guys, all of Congress, say, Supreme Court, you know, the executive office. 3 out of those, say, 600 people had a child that was in that action. Now that's 1/3 of 1% or something. That's absurd. You know, John McCain's son was in it. Joe Biden's son was in it. And who's the guy from Virginia? Jim Webb, who's a senator from Virginia. His son was in the Marine Corps. Nobody else, none of the rest. There was a female congressman. Her son was over there too. I forget who she was. But that was it. Out of all these people over a 10-year period, 4 kids showed that had any connection whatsoever to the politicians.
Yeah. So do you think, so you think there's a real disconnect between the politicians who are making decisions about war and the people who are fighting?
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. And these people pass themselves off as experts. Donald Rumsfeld's the perfect one, you know. Donald Rumsfeld never spent a day in combat in his life. But he's the one who's saying, no, we fight the wars with what we have. Well, he didn't have a war when he was in the military. He was in Navy Reserve in 54 to 56 when there was nothing going on. But he's passed himself off as some military expert. I'm the Secretary of Defense. Well, you've never done anything. How do you know all this? So he's overruling generals that you know, they're the best generals you're going to get your hands on, you know. But he knows what he wants, and they wanted the Halliburton company to make a bunch of money, and they did.
So do you think if these, like Secretary of Defense people who had real control over the war were directly affected, do you think that would make them a lot more wary?
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
They had no skin in the game. None of my kids are there. None of my sister's kids, nephews, nieces, none of them are there. Why do I care?
So what do you think that is there anything that we can do about it as like the citizens?
We should do our homework before we buy into this nonsense that, you know, well, just because Fox News blasts something at you all day doesn't mean it's right.
Okay, and then, so just moving on to maybe something a little more light, how do you think Vietnam War now is portrayed? Have you seen any movies about it?
I've seen just about all the movies about it, and very few of them are even close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In what way? What do they?
Well, they glorify all the violence and stuff in it, and it's nonsense, you know. Again, come on, Case. Yeah, I mean, it's you know, the violence they don't talk about. You know, they want to make it sound, you know, like Hollywood and ball. You know, it's all nice and shiny, truth and justice, and you get the girl at the end, and everybody lives happily ever after. Well, that's not what happens. You know, it's not going to be what happens. It's just, you know, wars are very ugly things. There's a whole lot of pain and ugly things going on. To think it's going to be fine at the end, probably not.
So then, what do you think, if you were trying to make like a movie about it, and if you really wanted to capture like what the war was really like to show people, what would be the main thing that you think everyone should take away from it?
The lives that are shattered, you know, that they survived the war, but they're shattered afterwards. They come home and they're dysfunctional. There's very little support. The VA talks a good game and delivers nothing. You know, they got so many backlog cases now from all these kids come back from Iraq and Afghanistan that traumatic brain injury is a lot worse than anything we are exposed to. You know, ours are mostly like, you know, missing limbs and things like that. You know, these guys are trapped inside a vehicle that's armored and it's a concussion. You know, you're not going to recover from those. You know, I mean, there's a kid I know lives right here in Tuckerton and stuff. He's 17 years in the Army and he doesn't know how old he is. He's 35. You know, and he can barely. How old are you? Let me think. He's a bright kid for him over there.
Yeah. So, do you think coming back from war, what you remember, what was the support like for you then?
None.
None.
Nobody wanted to hear about it.
No one.
Nobody asked you anything about Vietnam.
So, by no one, do you mean like the just people you knew coming back, like society kind of, like no one really wanted to know?
The only people that talked to you about it at all is another Vietnam veteran.
Yeah.
You know, the average person could care less. They didn't want to hear it.
They didn't want to hear it because they like wanted to deny it, or they didn't want to hear.
They didn't want to hear bad news. Nobody wants to hear bad news.
Okay.
You know, they were in denial. They just didn't have time to listen to my story. You know, they had their own lives to lead.
Yeah. So, do you think that was one of the main reasons, just the lack of support, why a lot of Vietnam veterans did mentally like deteriorate?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, they denied it. You know, even the older veterans shot us down. They didn't want anything to do with us.
Yeah.
They told us we were the first group to lose a war. So these are guys that fought World War II in Korea. We're looking to them a little guidance and direction. They want nothing to do with us.
So were there any, do you remember any maybe support groups for just like Vietnam vets?
They were, but the only way they got started was Vietnam vets started.
Okay.
Same thing with the wall. The memorial, Vietnam vets built that. Not a dime worth of government money. They did the same thing in Philly.
Yeah. That's
We'll
what
build our own. No, thank you. Well, you know.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Have you been to the Vietnam War Memorial in D.C.?
Yeah, a couple times.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How do you think about it?
I think it's great. Get people down there looking at stuff, you know. So.
Do you like that, Because it's really like, it's like a different memorial from like the rest of them. It's not like a statue. It's like just what it is. It's just black. It's reflective, and it just has all the names of everyone who was lost. So, do you think that is a good reflection of what the war was?
Yeah, I think I like the memorial. I think it's great.
Good.
You know, it's people. Well, it gets people talking about it. You know, a lot of people. I mean, there's so many people who would never say anything about it, but they make a pilgrimage of 800,000 miles down there to just see their kid's name on the wall. They probably wouldn't even tell anybody they went. You know.
Yeah. So then, I guess just one final question here. You just said that you wanted kids to know before we go into war, to know what they're fighting for. Is that what you mostly want everyone to take away from what we learned in Vietnam?
Well, if you're going to risk somebody's life, there better be a damn good reason for it. Other than you getting your stock price up 10%. That's not acceptable.
Yeah.
You know, you're doing it for monetary purposes. No way at all.
So I think the most interesting thing that I learned, how you went into war, by the time you came out, you were so ready to just stop anyone else from going into war.
Oh, it's bitter.
Yeah.
You know, my best friend got killed. I couldn't tell you how many guys that got killed
Yeah.
for absolutely nothing.
So, and I think that's the most interesting thing. Did you find a lot of instances like that?
Oh yeah, I know a lot of guys just like me. Nobody wanted to be bothered with that nonsense, you know. And they'd say I'd never let my kid go in the military.
Okay.
I thought the same thing.
Yeah. So then, for the future, you already said like just to like look before you leave, I guess. For the future war, I mean Afghanistan and Iraq now, just to make sure there's no disconnect between politicians and the war that they got us into, basically. And so, how do you think, just for the future, American citizens can like try to make sure this doesn't happen again?
Well, as I said, get all the information you possibly can, and you know, and don't follow leaders blindly, which is what we've done. You know, so and so says, "Let's go this way." Well, why don't we talk about this? Is there a better way? You know, I mean, can we use a different map? Maybe go around it instead of through it. You know,
Yeah.
they didn't consider any of that. They get the thing in their mind, and then they go and they cherry pick the intelligence with that weapons of mass destruction. They knew goddamn well there was no weapons of mass destruction in there. But any piece of intelligence that you know supported their case, they held on to. Anything that didn't, they tossed. So, you know, they pick and choose what they want.
Gotcha. So, did you have any pictures or anything you wanted to
Yeah,
show?
a ton of
Because I'd
pictures.
love to look.
That's there's boot camp. Lots of ugly guys.
So, was that your whole class?
Yeah.
I guess. Okay. How many?
There was 110, I think, in the platoon. That's the ship.
That's a ship you trained on?
I served on. Yeah.
Okay.
That's at the discharge. There's that was the captain. He was the executive officer of the ship.